So in today's video, I'm going to show you how to paint this simple papaya art print. The technique here is very quick and easy, and you'll get a unique result each time. As usual, you can follow this with any brushes you're comfortable with, but I'll list the ones I'm using in the description below. And to start painting, I'm going to make the silhouette of the papaya first. So for that, I'm going to grab the abstract round and a pretty saturated orangey yellow tone, and I'll draw out a sort of peanut shape like this, and I'm going to do it all in one stroke, and I'm going to go back and forth to totally fill it in. And this one turned out a little bit too crooked, so to fix it, I'm just going to grab the arrow tool, set to warp, and I'll try to straighten it out. And since I can't really fix this area by warping, I think I'll just kind of erase it. So for that, I'll grab the eraser brush, which is set to the fine liner pen, and I'll just cut this back. Now, since papayas are pretty simple fruits, I want to make this illustration more interesting by sort of slicing the papaya and showing the skin over here and then the inside over here. So to do that effect, I'm going to duplicate the silhouette. Then I'll grab the eraser brush, still set to the fine liner pen, and I'll use it to cut the duplicate in half, and then I'll erase everything on the left side. Next, I need to differentiate the inside of the papaya from the skin, and I'm going to do that by basically adjusting the color of this. So I'm going to make sure the top half here is selected. Then I'll go to my adjustments, and I'll darken it a little bit, saturate it, and shift it just a little bit towards green. There we go. After that, I'll grab the selection tool set to freehand, and I'll make a pretty wild selection like this. Then I'll feather it out. Again, hue, saturation, and brightness. And I'm going to try to introduce a little bit more green into those areas. I think I'll also darken it and mess with the saturation. And this is basically giving it a kind of two-tone gradient look, and I want to add a third tone. So once again, I'll use the freehand selection tool and just select pretty randomly, feather it out, and then mess with the hue again. After that, I want to do a little bit of creative blending. So I'm going to switch my brush to the water blender, and I'll use it at a medium size just to kind of stir everything up a little bit. I do want to make sure I don't accidentally go beyond the edge. I just want to make sure I stay inside. And this looks pretty good, but I think I'd like it to be a little bit brighter and more yellow in these orange areas. So to fix that, I'll grab the freehand selection tool again, try to select just those areas, feather it out, and then refine the colors using the hue, saturation, and brightness. And once the outer skin is finished like this, we can start working on the colors for the inside. So for that, I'm going to make sure I select the inside layer. I'll grab the freehand selection tool again, and I'll just select an area like this. I'll feather it out, and I'll try to mess with the color and add a little bit of a sort of rich red tone in there. I'll also make another kind of random selection, just to give it a little bit more variation. But this time though, I won't mess with the hue, I'm just going to mess with the brightness. Now between the inside and the outside, there's pretty good contrast, but I think I want to enhance it. And I can do that by either brightening the inside or darkening the outside. So I'll experiment with that and see what I can come up with. So to start, I'll select the outside, and I'll see what that looks like if I darken it. I think maybe it's not good to darken it because it'll make the colors too muddy. So instead, I'll select the inside and see if I can brighten it. And I think that definitely looks a lot better. And at this point, I've got all the major colors and tones kind of worked out, and I can finally move on and start adding some details. And I'll start by kind of finishing up the center. So for that, I'll make a blank layer that's between the outside and the inside of the papaya. I'll choose a sort of reddish orange tone like this. For the brush, I'll use the abstract round, and I'll just paint on a sort of teardrop shaped area like this, and this will be the center of the papaya with all the seeds. And you can see there's a little bit of transparency where it's showing through the skin, so I'm going to fix that with the eraser brush, and I'll just erase it wherever it's showing through. Now this looks really good, but I think the inside piece here might be too dark, so I'll lower the transparency to lighten it up. There we go. After that, I'll make a blank layer above that, and I'll move on and do the seeds. And those are just going to be using something just off black. For the brush, I'll use the abstract round, but at a super small size. And I'm just going to draw kind of a bunch of random circles like this, and then I'll fill in the gaps between. And the reason I do this is because I want them to be super random, and if I just kind of did them all in a row, they'd look too organized. And once again, you can see there's a little bit of a transparency issue, so I'll grab the eraser brush and just erase any of the seeds that are showing through. And at this point, the main papaya is finished, and we can move on and start making the slice. And I'm going to do that actually by kind of repurposing some of these layers. I'll start by merging together the inside of the papaya with that sort of dark slice. The seeds, though, are still on a separate layer. I'll duplicate the inside and then move it over off to the side here. Then I can grab the eraser brush, still set to the fine liner pen, and I'll erase everything that's sort of extra here on the right side. And once this slice is kind of cleaned up and finished, I'm going to do the seeds. So once again, I'll make a blank layer above it. I'll use my black tone, abstract round, and I'll just paint them all one by one. And now that all the different parts of the papaya are finished, I'm going to start putting together the final illustration. So for that, I'm going to start by sort of combining things together. So I'll merge all the layers for the slice together onto one layer. And then I'll do the same thing for the whole papaya, just so they're sort of cleaned up but still on separate layers. And this next part here is optional, but with simple illustrations like this, I love to give them a skew. This gives them a sort of kind of simplified perspective that makes everything more interesting. So to do that, just select one of the layers, grab the arrow tool, set it to distort, and I'm just going to skew it by kind of sliding this node, and I'll skew this one over to the left. Then I'll select the whole papaya, and I'll skew it to the right. After that, I can use the arrow tool to arrange them and create the final scene. Now, where they overlap, there's a little bit of transparency, and I can fix that by erasing it. Since the slice is in the front, I need to erase the whole papaya, so I'll make sure that layer is selected, and I'll just clean it up. And you can see where they overlap, there's a kind of a loss of contrast because they're the same color, so I'm going to fix that by adding a shadow. So to do that, I'll grab the selection tool set to freehand. I'll just rough out where I want there to be a shadow, and I'll just darken it and saturate it. And in this case, even with the shadow, the contrast is still struggling, so I think I'll brighten the slice to make it stand off more. So for that, I'll make sure the slice layer is selected. Freehand selection tool. I'll just highlight that area and feather it out. Hue, saturation, and brightness, and I'll brighten it. And once the scene is finished, all I have to do is use the text tool in Procreate to add a label on the bottom. The reason I use a super clean, kind of boring font for this is just because it contrasts really nicely with the sort of watercolor texture of the papaya. And just like that, this illustration is finished. I think I'm pretty happy with the result this time. However, when I compare it with the other papayas I painted, I do notice that the skin on this one is a little bit too variegated for my taste. I think next time I do this, I'll try to make the different colored areas a little bit larger and simpler like this. As always, if you think I've earned it, please give this video a like. And here are 2 more simple and colorful watercolor tutorials I think you'll love to watch next.